Hey everyone, I'm out here in my shed organizing a little bit of my fishing gear, saltwater gear, getting ready for the beginning of the 2019 season. It's the middle of March right now, and as soon as the water temperature hits about 55 degrees, or maybe even a little bit colder than that, and the striped bass start migrating here on the New Jersey coast, I'll be out there with my friend targeting them. So it's a long season. We go, for stripers starting in March and then through at least into the beginning of December. So the fishing gear only goes away for a few months. But anyway, while I'm out here, I wanted to talk a little bit more about my Delta drill press and sort of my theory behind buying it and why I would recommend it. And I talked about it a little bit in my sort of shed overview video, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about it. And so if you haven't seen that video, it's a Delta 12-inch drill press. It's I don't know when these were manufactured. I'd imagine this is at least 10 or 15 years old. I got it used on Craigslist for about $90. Actually, exactly $90. So the funny thing was, I was negotiating with the guy a little bit. I think he had it up for like $100, and I told him, how about 85 if you don't have the chuck key, and 100 if you do, or sorry, 90 if you do. And he said, okay, yeah, let me see if I can find it. And he probably just reached into his garage and somewhere and grabbed a chuck key. But here's a cool little tip: is to put a magnet on the side, and then you'll never lose your chuck key. And this is actually a decent chuck key. If he pulled it out of nowhere, it's a good one. It's a Jacobs brand, and of course, if you're not, Jacobs. If you're not familiar, this type of chuck is called a Jacobs chuck. Now, Jacobs is a brand, but it's sort of I'm abbreviating a lot on this, but this sort of jaw style chuck has become known as a Jacobs chuck because I think they invented it. But anyway, I do love this drill press. First of all, it's kind of heavy. It's probably in the neighborhood of about 80 pounds. You have a really solid, you have a casting here for the sort of the work plate or surface, I'm not really sure what it's called, and then the base is huge and very heavy, so it's very stable. And one big thing I really like about the drill press over my cordless drill is that it's very quiet. And I don't know how well that's going to come up on camera, but it is really, really quiet. I still use hearing protection just because of, it's a good idea for a shop environment, but it is a very, very quiet drill press. And I'm not sure about other drill presses, but I think that'd be one definite advantage to buying a drill press. So this one has, I'll start it from the top here. This has a V belt, so if the cross section of the belt is a V, you can't really tell that here, but it is tapered, and it's a 2-pulley, 5 speeds, and the speed range is a very versatile one, 3100 RPM down to 620. 620 is very, very slow, and there's a sort of a guide here for different materials and your drill size and what speed you should be using. And I tend to stick on the slower side. Like, I do a lot of small holes in aluminum, which I would consider up here a soft metal. They say 3100. I usually go down in the 1100 range or 1700, but I feel like I have more control at a slower speed, especially on small and fragile parts. And it's also over here with millimeter diameter if you like that as well. But to change the speed, you loosen this nut here, which is or this wing bolt, and that releases the motor. Sits back here. That releases the motor, so it can sort of move in a little bit, and then that gives you enough slack in the belt to sort of to shimmy it up or down wherever you're looking for. And then this is pre-tension, so all you have to do is kind of like, you don't have to put any pressure on the motor. You can just tighten this back down, and it'll find its neutral point. Or at least that's how I've been doing it, and I haven't run into any problems like belt slipping or anything like that. But if there's probably a better way to check belt tension. And I mentioned here that a good trick for your chuck is chuck key is to put a magnet on the side. I probably should have done it on the other side where there's more room and it's not in the way of the handles here, but that's kind of where I put it. And I said in the other video, this beer tap that I got as a prize somewhere, the threads fit perfectly into this sort of handle here. So that was a cool little decoration. It's probably a little bit unsafe. It's fun to use, but it's more for decoration. It's probably a little bit unsafe because of the weight. It tends to just kind of keep if you're depressing the press here, the extra weight kind of keeps it from retracting all the way. So just tread lightly with that. Over here is kind of hard to see, but this is your depth indicator, and this is a 2.5-inch throat drill press, which means that this you can press down 2.5 inches, and this is actually a depth stop. I have it all the way. You loosen this wing nut here, and you can rotate this to set your max depth. If you have a lot of repeated cuts, that's kind of a cool thing to do. But I leave it all the way at the max, so I have the whole range. And it has inches and millimeters on here as well. I don't know how much I would trust that. I would just do a measurement or test a scrap piece before using that to make sure that this scale is correct. So anyway, I wish the plate here was just a little bit bigger to have a little bit more surface area to work on. What I did was I added, or right here I'm using just a piece of scrap wood clamped down with this clamp, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's usually what I do is, actually I'll spring this off here to show. There's just a hole under there. But if I'm working on very small parts that are kind of hanging over this edge, I try to back it with wood so that it's not, whoops, screw got under there, so that it doesn't sort of flex into the hole and do something I don't want it to. And this clamp over here it's like a vice grip style clamp that I got from Harbor Freight. Vice grip style being it has this screw knob on the back here to adjust the pressure or how tight it gets, and it fit. I think this is marketed specifically for drill presses and machines, and it has a wing like a wing nut on the bottom here or like an eye nut, and that's how you tighten it down. And it's convenient for doing exactly this with the holding down like a piece of scrap wood or something. But I did that because if you look at the bottom of the casting here, it has these ribs, and or I'm not sure if that's the right word, but these parts of the casting here that it makes this bottom surface not completely flat. So if I'm trying to use a C-clamp or something on the side here to hold something down, C-clamp or a bar clamp or whatever, it encounters this narrow edge, and it's a very uneven surface, and it's hard to clamp exactly on the edge. So it would be more convenient if this bottom part was completely flat all the way out to the edge. So if you're looking at drill presses, that's something to consider that I never would have thought of. While we're down here, this is like the center bolt or pin, so to speak. You actually tighten this nut, and the pin, it's attached to a pin that pops out, and then you can loosen this bolt and tilt the table to change your angle. And there's an angle guide up over here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. I always leave it right in the middle, but that's how you do that. Yeah. So anyway, this was a good advantage to sort of counteract that uneven surface on the bottom, which is hard to clamp to. And of course, back over here, you've got the lever to raise and lower it. It's I guess some kind of worm gear or something on these teeth, and it pivots from side to side. One note is that sometimes this piece will get jammed, and or it'll tweak over a little bit, and you won't be able to rotate this. So if that happens, don't panic. You can just tap this with a hammer, and it'll usually loosen up. And then the securement over here tightens it down, but I'll leave it loose so I can manipulate it for the video. And I wish I had a good like a machinist square to check the angle on this and make sure that it is actually 90 degrees, but I'll have to borrow one from work or something because all my squares are big squares for woodworking. And I think that's about it. Like I said, it's heavy. It just stays up here on my workbench. It was pretty difficult to move up here, but especially by myself. So it's just something to consider if you're thinking of portability. This is probably not what you're looking for. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about why I chose this drill press. And Delta is a very good brand, or at least I think they are, common for professionals. And one of my high school shop teachers really loved them. So if it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me. And I found a good deal on it. So keep your eyes open on Craigslist and on the secondary market to buy these sorts of things. And tools and how much you spend on them and the quality is something you could argue about until the cows come home. Ultimately it comes down to what works for you and what you're willing to spend. But for something like this, I would recommend buying higher quality as opposed to something like from Harbor Freight. I think the cheapest Harbor Freight drill press is about $60, and it's a lot smaller than this. Actually, what I think what I forgot to mention is that 12 inches means that there's a 6-inch distance from your drill bit to the back of the this post here, or I guess to the front of the post. So you could have, in theory, a 12-inch diameter workpiece that you're working on. So that's where a 12-inch comes from. And anyway, the cheapest one from Harbor Freight is I think it's an 8-inch. So you have a 4-inch distance behind the drill bit to work with, and which is fine. It would be plenty for everything I'm doing. But the reason you buy a drill press or some sort of precision machine like a tabletop machine like a drill press as opposed to using a cordless drill is because of its merit as being true to your work surface and being a perfect 90-degree hole that you're drilling to your workpiece. So if you buy a cheaper drill press and it doesn't accomplish that, you've kind of defeated the purpose of buying a drill press in the first place, or some other kind of bench top replacement to a handheld tool. In this case, drill press replacing a hand drill. So something to consider if you're looking at how much something like this would cost. I don't know what these cost new. I'd imagine it's a few $100s, and I was fortunate to get a good used one for a lot less than that. So shop around a little bit, but I would definitely recommend spending the extra money on a higher quality one. It'll last a lot longer, and it'll do exactly what you're looking for. The only other consideration is how many speeds it might have. I don't know of any drill presses that don't have changeable speeds. That would be pretty useless for different materials. You do have to be different materials, different diameters. You do have to take that into account. So I think that's about it for this video. Hopefully you maybe learned something, maybe got some inspiration for your own tools and how you might buy them or use them. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.